So we're here to talk a little bit about what Kundalini integration means and what what the difference is between integration and awakening, and just kind of bringing a little bit more clarity on those terms to people, but also maybe talking a little bit about what really is Kundalini. And we've talked about that in the past, you and I, but perhaps like a little refresher for people. What is Kundalini and why do we even need to be talking about it?
Yeah. Thank you, Susie. Beautiful to be here with you. I think it's good to start with that question. What exactly are we talking about? What is Kundalini? And acknowledging what many people will have heard about, what the kind of ideas people will have picked up about Kundalini. So beginning with let's say the popular ideas on Kundalini. For many people, it'll be through Kundalini yoga or having heard of Kundalini yoga that they'll have heard of Kundalini. And so I think it's good to start with the distinction that Kundalini yoga is a specific school of yoga. It's not the only way that people can practice Kundalini yoga. Although there's a school called Kundalini yoga, it's actually just, let's say, branded itself with the name. But the school is, I think it was set up in the 1960s, maybe, and 60s, 70s, I'm guessing. And the practice of Kundalini yoga is at least, let's say, 1,000 years old. And in terms of the principles and practices, they go further back than that. But there are references already 1,000 years ago that go far back to there of what's mostly referred to as Laya Yoga, Laya, Laya Yoga, and Siddha Yoga, Kriya Yoga, and Kundalini Yoga. There's to some extent some interchangeability what's the word? Yeah, these words are interchangeable in the ancient tradition. They've come to mean different things in modern times because different schools have become known for example, Kriya Yoga, and different schools for Kundalini Yoga, but really it all goes back to the same practices that relate to the ancient forms of yoga and Tantra. So we're essentially talking about something that's common to across yogic practice in ancient history and across tantric practice. You don't really find Tantra or yoga without Kundalini being at the core of it in ancient practice. And so what is it, what we're talking about? What is Kundalini? You can think of it, first of all, as life force. You can think of it as energy. But more specifically, you can think of it as a function of the life force that relates to spiritual self-realization, liberation. So it's a way in which the life force can manifest, in which it can be activated, in which it can unfold. And this particular unfolding of the life force, you could say a blossoming of the life force, is referred to as Kundalini flow, Kundalini awakening, Kundalini. Ultimately, what we want to get clear about is integration. What's, like Susie was saying at the beginning, what's the difference really between the more popular idea that people have of just awakening Kundalini and integration? Because we can have, let's say, an exciting experience of energetic awakening, a phenomenon where the body is experiencing spasms, and it can be pleasurable, it can be pretty frightening depending on how ready someone is for the experience and how they interpret the experience. You know, we can kind of shut down and try to resist this change in what we're experiencing. It can be something that we fear instead of open to and experience as beautiful and blissful and divine. And so the preparation is really a strong component in having a healthy experience that doesn't lead to, um, well, in the worst case scenario, or close to the worst case scenario, you could say that people, in some cases, will end up fighting so much against what they're experiencing
Mhm.
that they'll end up feeling that they're going crazy
Yeah.
because they have no way to understand the change that's taking place. And they're not really aligning with this transformation that's taking place in their body, in their experience of life. So, some people will be practicing yoga supposedly with some degree of openness to transformation, to deep transformation. And so theoretically, they would be ready. But I know of cases where people have been in a yoga school for years and have experienced a Kundalini awakening, and they have had no support within that school because the teachers had no understanding of what was taking place.
Mhm.
Because I mentioned that the principle of Kundalini awakening was central to ancient yoga, to the yoga tradition. But in modern times, a yoga teacher will often not really receive any training relating to Kundalini. They'll receive training about asana, about posture, about alignment. And this is let's say, it's a modern focus, a modern filtering of the yoga tradition, the yoga teachings, the yoga practices to provide something that has tremendous health benefits. We feel great doing, let's say, modern yoga, but it's lacking the bigger picture for the most part of what unfolds in the mind, in the body, what is awakened, and so even yoga teachers will tend to be unprepared for the experience or for supporting others in their experience.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I, as you're talking, I have like so many questions that are racing in my mind, and I'm like
great,
writing some
great.
of them.
Yeah, feel free
But
to interrupt me if I go on.
it's like it's a really big topic, and we could do like a series on it, like ten,
Let's do that.
10 series or
We
something.
talked
But
briefly about that, but let's at least do a
yeah,
three-part series.
yes. So I love that you said I love how you put it, it's a function of the life force. I love that. I feel like I want to kind of like, uh, what do you call it? Kind of like open it up a little bit. Like, how is that a function of the life force? And not
Yeah,
necessarily now, but this could be sometime like in another um, get together. But I wanted to say for now, like, can you describe, just to help people that are watching, what symptoms people might experience that can tell them that what they're going through is an awakening?
yeah,
What are the symptoms to look for? What are the signs?
yeah.
Because, like you
Uh,
said, some people might think they're going crazy, but in reality, there's something shifting, and that's labeled as crazy, but it's really not. It's an
yeah.
awakening.
Yeah, and there has been work done by some people within the field of psychology and psychiatry, even to understand the Kundalini phenomenon, to help to prevent people from ending up going down the route of psychiatric care
Mhm.
when that's not what's required for those people. But because society is generally not unprepared to hold space for the process, that has been a risk for people. Um, so the symptoms vary tremendously and will depend partly on where someone is at. So what the symptoms will be, you could call it symptoms of transition, you know? from
Mhm.
one state to another state, from um, one definition of what's normal for you to a new the expression new normal is now associated with COVID, unfortunately, but it's what comes up in my mind. You know, you go from what was normal for you
Yeah.
to a whole new experience that ultimately becomes normal for you, but it's a transition. So what symptoms come up for you will depend on what you have been experiencing as normal. So there's let's say that you are practicing yoga and or some form of meditation or breath work. In that kind of context, your symptoms might be, for example, experiencing undulation in your spine, and this could look like a kind of orgasmic physiological response. So this is one way in which the energy flow can manifest by moving you physically. Your body starts to have involuntary spasms, and if you relax into this, it will probably be beautifully experienced as beautiful as blissful, perhaps as ecstatic, if you're able to just relax into it. And for some people, it's pressure that they'll feel or heat. Um, Something that I sometimes more or less jokingly, but not totally not totally as a joke, that I say to people is that a well integrated Kundalini um, awakening, a well integrated one, which can mean a well one that you're well prepared for, and we can talk more about what that means to be well prepared or well or able to go through the integration. But if you're well prepared, if you're able to integrate smoothly, you could literally have a Kundalini awakening without any of the symptoms that are usually associated with Kundalini. And you might ask yourself, well, but is that, would I want that? Wouldn't I want all these amazing experiences? Like people often they're hungry for the experience, for the phenomenon, for the wow factor of a Kundalini awakening, almost more than the actual benefits that it brings. They just want that kind of orgasmic symptom that's associated with it. But really, that's to some extent a bit of a distraction. You know, the Kundalini phenomenon, let's say, as an experience of transition can be, it can all the attention can end up be there. But what the gift of the process is you could call it a melting away of old patterns. So if we think of what holds our sense of reality and our patterns of how we experience ourselves and how we experience life, these patterns are held in place through a whole bunch of things, ranging from our posture, our thoughts, our beliefs, our neural neural pathways that we've built up, our biochemistry in its, let's say, habitual state. So there's a whole series of components that make up our normal, right? Our normal state. And one thing that you can associate with Kundalini awakening is a radical change that takes place in your physiology. Ultimately, a shift in your biochemistry. This is, of course, not something that you're going to necessarily be fully aware of, right? How your biochemistry is changing. But to put this in, let's say, everyday experiential terms, you can think of it as each mood is associated with a certain biochemical state, right? Each mood is associated with certain hormones. And
Yeah.
so you can be experiencing the mood of sadness and perhaps of pessimism, and this is going to be activating let's say your adrenals and if you shift into a mood of blissful openness to life, right, and a sense of um, wondrous openness to life, that's going to be, you can describe it as a mood shift, but it's also going to be inevitably, naturally, a biochemical shift. And ultimately, as you continue to come back to this new state of mind, of feeling, this is going to create new neural pathways, new, because you're looking at the world differently, you're interacting with the world differently, you're seeing things differently, so different responses arise in you. It's a transformation that is described also popularly as an awakening of the chakras, or a clearing of the chakras, right? So,
Mhm.
but this, although these are popular terms, they may not be clear terms for people. Like,
Yeah.
just as we begin with the question, like, what exactly are we talking about when we say Kundalini? People may be familiar to some extent with the chakras when we speak of them, but it's worth asking, what do we really mean when we speak of the chakras as well?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like Susie was saying, this could be a series for us to go into depth on multiple aspects.
So you sort of described, the ecstatic space of like what that might create, but as we know that it's not, sometimes it's not that easy, and in most cases it's actually very difficult, and it's, um, to mildly put it, it's painful. It's like
Yeah,
very painful. It's a painful process, but
yeah,
it's a
it can
painful
really, yeah,
process of growth. So it's more of like, how I would describe it is it's a growth in consciousness, if that makes sense.
absolutely,
It's
yeah,
not, it's not, yeah, the symptoms are physical, there's an ecstasy to it, but there's more to that. It's not just the physical that's changing, there's something more subtle that's happening.
yeah,
But which kind of brings me to the topic of blockages, because sometimes somebody will start on that Kundalini awakening and then a blockage happens. And that's why the integration part of it is really important. And how do you integrate this pain?
yeah,
And for me, I feel like it's really painful when you grow up with a belief that you hold so dearly to yourself. And then all of a sudden, you look at it again and it's no longer relevant. And you're like, this was a lie that I've held on to so dearly. And it was all a lie. Why did they lie to me? That's the
yeah,
thing, right?
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
how do we integrate that? And that's what we're going to be working with in Italy. But also, maybe Peter can give us a little, summary right now.
yeah. I can certainly touch on some aspects of it, and like you said, there is often, it's a painful experience, and that can be emotionally painful. It can be physically painful, and like you said, there's it's important to address that theme of blockages, because that's where things get painful, where there are things we may feel that we can't let go of, um, and often that's because we have associated some belief, some perspective with something that supports us, nourishes us, keeps us safe,
Mhm.
gives us certainty, right? And there's nothing we like less than having our certainties challenged, because it's like having the rug pulled out from underneath us. And if we don't know what we think we know, then where do we stand? It's this sense of not having a ground to stand on. And so to the extent to which we are holding on to familiar perspectives, we're going to be challenged. You could say that in order to surrender to the process of spiritual evolution, and that's what we're talking about really when we speak of Kundalini awakening and integration. It's a, like you said, it's a process of consciousness change. It's a process of spiritual development. It's a process of letting go. Because what does that mean as well? Spiritual development. You know, these are kind of common things to say, but what do we mean, right? We can think of it as leaving behind the concepts we've built up about ourselves and coming closer and closer to a true clarity about our true nature. And not just clarity in terms of being able to talk about it and give words that are more correct than the other words we used to use, but also to be able to live in alignment with that clarity.
Mhm.
So it's a change, not just in our understanding, but in how we're able to live our lives. But sometimes we could call them spiritual beliefs, right? Spiritual certainties. And those seem to be things that we wouldn't want to let go of. But sometimes they're spiritual dogmas that it just hadn't occurred to us that they could be not entirely true,
Mhm.
not, let's say, they won't stand up to infinity. They're a structure that makes sense for us for a while, but ultimately they have to crumble
Mhm.
in the face of life itself. And so there's a return to innocence that you can think of. Also, as part of spiritual evolution, it's not just gaining more information or knowledge, but actually letting our knowledge be dissolved so that we're in intimate experience. Because knowledge can become a distance from life, a filter through which we're interpreting everything. It can be a position where we actually become kind of arrogant while thinking we're knowledgeable. And so this is one of the challenges that we'll have, is to really be faced with an inevitability of everything crumbling.
Yeah. It's interesting because recently had this epiphany, and I actually like sent it out in my newsletter, that shadow work is actually part of the Kundalini process. It's the Kundalini awakening. If you're not going through a Kundalini awakening, you're not going to be able to do your shadow work. You're not going to want to look. And it's like that whole um, peeling the onion kind of thing, like looking inside and like really trying to understand what the truth is.
Yeah,
That takes a lot. It's painful.
it does. And for most people, it requires going through pain to become open to doing the shadow work. It
Yeah.
requires, because, we don't tend to be masochists, right? So if we're comfortable enough, we don't want to go through pain. We just want to stay comfortable. So usually it's pain that will mobilize us to become willing to make change and to become available to radical change in our experience and our thinking and our relationship to life, and you could say to the divine, to the sacred.
Yeah.
But to keep things, let's say, simple, you could think of it as your relationship to life. And usually, like, it's pain that makes us um, become, not just, you could say, it's not that we become comfortable with change, but we just realize we can't delay it anymore,
Yeah.
because what we've been living is painful, and so we become open to the new, because the old was painful.
Mhm.
uh, yeah.
I love this concept of looking at pain as a gift. pain is
Yeah.
a gift. That's a great way to look at it. And perhaps pain isn't that unbearable.
It can be that portal to change,
Mhm.
and like you're saying, it can be that gift that becomes a portal to change. And there's something that I say to my students when they begin a journey into tantra, because really this is also what we're talking about. This is all, let's say, these are tantric principles and real yogic principles in the ancient sense of yoga and the ancient sense of tantra. And what I say to people is that there's one condition for practicing tantra, and that is that you must be open to change, transformation, because it's going to happen. If you're going to do tantric practice, you're going to go through change. So if you're not approaching it with that openness, if you think you're just going to have pleasant, blissful, pleasurable experiences, and that's what you think tantra is, then you're setting yourself up for pain. But um, yeah, and as written in the chat, pain is a
Yeah.
gift. Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a great risk of going into a practice that will change you without being aligned with change. Um, for many people, what they might be familiar with, it's become very popular to do psychedelic type of therapies, plant medicines. And so that for many people that aren't that familiar with Kundalini, this could be a reference, an example, let's say, of how it's not something you want to go into thinking, oh, this is going to be fun.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
might be fun, but you don't want to go in with that expectation and not ready to
Yeah.
go through facing your shadow. Exactly, because that is it's a great way to describe the Kundalini process. That it is a coming into contact with what was in the shadow, what was subconscious. Light gets brought to what was previously subconscious, old patterns that were not choices we made intentionally. Like, oh, I'm going to look at the world like this. I'm
Yes.
going to see the world like this. I'm going to think like this. These aren't choices we've made. They're things that have kind of built up in our subconscious. And Kundalini awakening, and it makes sense to think of it as a form of shadow work. It's bringing light to these places that have, let's say, our subconscious structures, our subconscious patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, kind of recognizing the way the world has been built. Um, so much so that just to live, you have to pay just in order to live. And even if you die, you also have to pay because you gotta like buy your burial space and your coffin and all that stuff. And it's
Even
like,
death is expensive,
really?
right?
Yeah, like really? Like I have to pay to live? Water, you pay for it. You pay for a place to live, a roof over your head. You pay for literally your survival, which is your food. And I don't know that creation was meant to be this way, but we sort of made it this way. And I think just recognizing that in itself is like getting to that understanding of like, what have I been taught? What is this mess? And that's painful to recognize, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, this could take us down a whole other avenue of exploration. Because you could make an argument for why there are benefits to the complexity of society and industry, and the fact that we're on these tools that we're using to communicate across an 8-hour different of time zones, where we're
Mm-hmm.
communicating across the world through these technological innovations. But the fact
Well,
is,
in the
we're not
medieval ages,
physiologically.
sorry, I
Yeah,
just
go
had to
ahead.
throw in a little joke. I was like,
Yeah.
well, in the Middle Ages, I would have just got on a ship and gone to Portugal, and we could have just had a chat together face to
Yeah.
face.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. We can end up we can use the innovations for good, or we can become kind of lazy with them because yeah, I mean we could make the effort to actually meet in person, and that's a good opportunity to mention we're going to be in person in Italy
Yeah.
giving a retreat in October for those of you who are hearing that for the first time. um,
We do have a question from Anna. She says, how do you know you are open? And I think we'll probably answer that and wrap it up
yeah,
for today. And then hopefully we can get on another live next time. I think
yeah,
next time we'll just broadcast on Instagram,
sure,
the better
yeah,
option.
yeah,
So, yeah, how do you know you are open?
yeah. Well, it's it's a good question. You know, it's a to some extent it's a relative thing. Like you might be open to some things, right? To some degree of change, but not too much. Or you might be open when you're feeling safe and you're feeling arrested and you're feeling fed and you're just, you know, there's nothing that's urgently calling your attention, so you're open to what life is bringing you that might be not what was predicted, not what was expected. But then when we're a little bit tired and when things are kind of pressuring us and then we're trying to manage a bunch of things, then any little change in what we had foreseen becomes too much. And so our openness is not, it's not a simple on off or like you are an open person or you're not. It's something that we can cultivate by being aware of what nourishes us, you know, because if we're um, you could think of being nourished is a multifaceted thing. You know, we can be nourished by um, good food, right, in order to be healthy. We also can be nourished by good emotional connections. You know, feeling that we have a network of support of people that we can communicate with, that we feel understood when we speak with them. And so if we have the various things that nourish us, it's easier to be open. And if we're undernourished in any of the facets that are part of our of what's meaningful to us, and we can explore that also in another live, we can go into more depth about that. But yeah, did you want to say something, Susie?
Yeah, I think there's like a flexibility of the mind that's required to be open. And that doesn't just happen. You have to have the ability to be open to different perspectives, to be open to different cultures, to be open to different ideas, to be open to different people who are not like you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Otherwise, like closed-mindedness is not going to allow for any growth to happen.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
That's kind of what came to me when you were talking
yeah.
about that.
I completely agree with that. My emphasis when speaking of this kind of thing is on the malleability that we have, because we can become more inflexible, more closed, or we can become more
Mhm.
open.
Yeah.
You know, we can look at people that we might think of as fitting to some extent a category. Like this person is very open. We might sort of see that that's frequently how they come across, or this person's very
Mhm.
closed. But even the people who are very open, if they're overwhelmed, they'll become closed. And
Yes.
that's a self-defense mechanism. And that's something that's helpful for us to understand. Are we when are we overwhelmed? And if we are, and most people won't see themselves as closed, no matter how closed they are. They will tend to not see themselves as closed. They'll tend to see themselves as probably being just realistic. You know, people that that's how we like to see ourselves that way. So
Mhm.
someone who's closed will probably just see that other people who are more open as having something wrong with them.
Yeah.
And
Not
so, yeah,
necessarily. It's like that's where they are on their path, right? Like that's a good way to view it. So Anna's saying, yes, of course, but I was thinking more about what you need to let go to be able to receive. What needs to be let go.
yeah. Well, I would put this down to at the most direct experiential level. I would say you need to let go of your tension, right? Because we can think of this in more complex terms, like we need to
Mhm.
change our habits, we need to change our thinking, the patterns, let's say. But these patterns will change if we feel safe enough. These patterns will change if we feel well enough, basically. And so when we release the tensions, you could refer to them as anxieties, as stresses, as things that are contracting us at some level. If we're able to release the contraction, the stress, the self-defense habits that we've put up, the walls we've put up, which come from feeling unsafe. Like if we go down to the deepest level, that's the on-off switch. If you feel unsafe, you'll be closing yourself. And if you feel safe, you'll start to be able to open. And then that by practicing by developing the conditions for feeling safe, even older patterns of behavior and beliefs will start to change.
Hey, thank you, Peter. I think, yeah, release tension. Yes, that's why we do yoga
Yeah,
sometimes. But there
yeah,
are other modalities too that can help release tension, and I'm a big fan of dancing.
yeah,
So, this and more in Italy, but also hopefully in another live that we'll get to in the next couple of weeks.
yeah.
However, if you haven't checked out the link to the retreat in Italy, this is a good time to take some time and check it out. And if you have any questions, please send them my way or Peter's way or Natasha's way. I'll be talking to Natasha tomorrow. So it looks like it's going to be an Instagram live for that. So everyone's welcome to join us for that as well.
Great.
And I'll leave you for today. I don't know if there's any other last words anybody would like to say. Otherwise, we will call
Um,
it a wrap.
just to thank you, Susie, for hosting this and yeah, for this exploration together. Also, thank you, Anna, for coming live and sharing your questions. And look
Yes,
forward to doing this again in the next couple of weeks.
absolutely. This is a pleasure. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
take care, everyone. We'll see you next
Big hug.
time. Bye bye.
Bye bye.